Hi, this is Dr. Gordo, and welcome to the Raven the Wring Desk. Today we are looking at adjectives. Adjectives, they modify nouns. And when we say modify nouns, all that really means is we're adding descriptive words to our text, and we are adding on some quality and quantity factors to our noun. In English, the adjective usually appears immediately before the noun, as in the sentence, the big house or the huge house. In this case, big modifies the noun house. And we can go on and on with this. That was an amazing play. What a huge effort. Identify the noun. If you want to add on some descriptive words to that noun, that's where your adjectives come in. And we can use multiple adjectives for the same noun, such as the sentence, the snake revealed two massive white fangs. Now, sometimes the adjectives will require commas or a conjunction, such as and. I put together a sentence here. I need a nice long vacation somewhere hot but quiet. Now, you may be wondering, how come in the snake sentence you piled the adjectives on, whereas in the second sentence you used a comma for one set of the adjectives, nice and long, whereas you used a conjunction but in between hot and quiet. So when do you use the commas, and when do you use the conjunctions, and when do you just skip them? On this channel, we don't say just because. We don't say, oh, because it sounds good. There is an answer for everything. And when it comes into proper use of commas, we often get into a detailed conversation about clauses. So I'm going to kind of take the easy way out on this one and not explain how come I've got commas and conjunctions in the second example and not in the first one. All I can say for now, it has to do with clauses, and I'm going to leave it at that. But the more videos you watch on this channel and the more you personally read and write, the more obvious it's going to become when you need to make those grammatical calls or punctuation calls. What I will do right now is give you a warning that because the writer can pile on adjectives, I hope it's obvious that that can become annoying. It can just become it can really ruin a good piece of writing to add in unnecessary adjectives where you're just piling on the description and making it thicker and thicker so that the reader just doesn't want to make the effort to cut their way through it. Always keep your writing tight and interesting. And you'll be saying, well, how do I do that? Well, the how is in the writer's craft. I can just tell you, describe what is necessary and move on. If you think there's a good word to add on to your noun, a good adjective, a good descriptive word, well, go for it. Add it in there. See how it sounds. And of course, we're always going to have the courage to edit. And we're always going to favor substance over description. And as a side note, this is also a good example of where you need to develop your vocabulary. Because instead of saying a big house or the huge house, why not just say mansion? Always use one word instead of two. And if you're thinking, you know what, in this case, huge house is the perfect way to describe it, great. Go with it and move on. And why don't we move on in the meantime? And as we move along here, I should point out that although in English, the adjective will usually come right before the noun, immediately before the noun, it can appear elsewhere in the sentence, thanks to something called a predicate adjective. Here we go, English teachers, terminology time. you're going to use a linking verb, such as the verb to be, to use an adjective to modify the subject, as in the sentence, that car is fast. Car is the noun here, but it's also the subject. The car is fast. So is our linking verb, taking that adjective fast and taking us back to car thanks to something called a subjective complement. And to me, this is another one of the examples of the magic of language. Even though the adjective doesn't appear until the end of the sentence, even though in English we read from left to right, when we get to that adjective at the end, its meaning reverberates, meaning back through the sentence. And anyways, all you need to take away from there is an adjective can appear elsewhere in the sentence to modify the subject. The actual terms for it, you don't need to know about it. You don't need to remember it. Okay, now that we're getting more confident with adjectives, you can know that there's 3 different types. Again, English teacher type territory. There's absolute, comparative, and superlative adjectives. I always like saying that word, superlative. Our absolute adjectives are our basic adjectives, basic describing words. Good luck, sneaky guy, strict rules, angry birds, terrible news. Now, when we talk about comparative adjectives, obviously there's a comparison going on. We're taking that noun and comparing it to itself or a similar group, another noun. So if one set of guys is sneaky, but there's another group that is more sneaky, we would say sneakier guys, stricter rules, angrier birds. We're going to follow normal spelling conventions in English. If English has normal spelling conventions, quite often we can just add ER onto the adjective, such as stricter. But if the word ends in a Y, the Y becomes an I, such as sneakier and angrier. For those who are familiar with the English language, you'll know that we don't have a word gooder. That through the evolution of the English language, if we want to say something is more good than something else, we say that it is better. And on that note, if an adjective has more than one syllable, chances are we can't just add ER to it, such as terrible. We don't say in English terribler. We just don't do it. It's a multi-syllable word, so we're actually just going to use the word more for our comparative adjective. You got terrible news? Well, I have more terrible news, like it's a contest or something. Finally, we have the superlative adjectives. So if something is the best or the greatest, we need to make sure that it stands out. And just like the comparative adjectives, we're going to add ER. For the superlatives, we're just going to add EST, such as the strictest rules or the sneakiest guys. They are the most sneakiest out of everyone in the group. They are the sneakiest guys. They are the angriest birds. That 2-syllable rule continues to apply. We can't say terribleist in English. The word just doesn't exist. We say most terrible. Oh, we had terrible news, and we had more terrible news, and now we have the most terrible news. But on the bright side, I wish you the best of luck. We don't have goodist in English. It's, perhaps it's a slang term. Instead, we say best. So, I feel this is pretty straightforward, and let's just move along to what I think is really cool, and that is adjectives have a hierarchy. They have an order of preference. Even though we can use multiple adjectives to describe the same noun, we need to think about what is it about that quality and quantity that we're using to modify the noun. It comes in the order of opinion, size, age, color, origin, material, purpose. If you're familiar with the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, you may have noticed that you cannot rearrange those adjectives. You cannot say my Greek fat big wedding. You can't say my fat big Greek wedding. English natives in the audience will say, yeah, that doesn't sound right. Why is that? That's part of the magic of English, that adjectives, the way they modify the noun. As you modify that noun and it develops, you'll find that the adjectives must come in a certain order or it just becomes gibberish. And if you don't believe me, take any inanimate object, any noun that's in front of you right now. Look at that object and then think, okay, in another world, if I was to have that same object, what is its purpose? What is it made out of? Where did it come from? What color is it? How old is it? How big is it? And what is your general opinion of it? Is something that is good, something that is bad? Look at that object, give it all those adjectives, and then just try to put together a sentence where you don't follow the order of opinion, size, age, color, origin, material, purpose. And you'll find that, yeah, it just doesn't sound right. And if you're new to English and you're not sure what sounds right, just trust me on this one. Write down this order, keep it in your notes, because if you're going to be using multiple adjectives, you're going to want to have this list in front of you. So to recap, adjectives describe nouns. They usually appear right before the noun, but they can appear later in the sentence to modify the subject. You can use more than one adjective, but again, you're only using the adjective because you have the perfect descriptive word for that noun. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know if I really need to modify the noun, then don't. Keep your writing tight. And then while you're at it, if you're keeping score at home, you're an English teacher, there are 3 different kinds of adjectives: absolute, comparative, and superlative. So next up, you could check out my video on adverbs, or you can check for a deeper dive called Verbs Galore, where we're talking about linking verbs and all the other different kinds of verbs. In the meantime, like, subscribe, and if you have any questions about any videos, please put it in the comments section. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can, and I will talk to you in the next one. See ya.